The year 2025 has arrived, not with hope, but with a sense of global fragility. Our systems, meant to protect and uplift, are buckling under overlapping crises. Over 305 million people now need humanitarian aid, a staggering testament to widespread suffering. Aid workers themselves are under attack, with hundreds killed last year, crippling relief efforts. When convoys are halted and helpers targeted, it's not just a logistical failure, it's a moral one. From famine in the Middle East and Africa to conflict zones worldwide, emergencies are converging into a perfect storm. We are living through profound instability, and the cost of inaction grows every day. In Gaza, famine is no longer a threat. It's reality. The streets are filled with the sounds of hunger and desperation, as families wait for hours in the hope of receiving a single meal. The devastation is everywhere, from shattered homes to empty markets, and the sense of loss is overwhelming. Children are dying from hunger, and families face impossible choices daily. Parents are forced to watch their children waste away, powerless to help, as food becomes scarcer with each passing day. The pain of hunger is etched on every face. Life-saving aid is blocked by severe restrictions, while desperate civilians risk and lose their lives seeking food. Every attempt to bring in supplies is met with obstacles, and the few who succeed often pay a heavy price. Calls to open land crossings go unanswered, leaving millions trapped in a man-made catastrophe. The world watches as hope fades, and the crisis deepens with each day of inaction. In Sudan, half the population, 25 million people, faces imminent starvation, with famine already declared in several regions. The scale of suffering is immense, as families walk for days in search of food and water, only to find empty relief centers. Conflict has shattered infrastructure and cut off vital supplies, while the world's attention drifts elsewhere. Hospitals lie in ruins, and roads are impassable, making it nearly impossible for aid to reach those in need. Humanitarian funding is critically short, forcing agencies to scale back as disease and hunger spread unchecked. The resources that do arrive are not enough, and every day, more lives are lost to preventable causes. Aid is being cut, and the silence of the international community is a death sentence for millions. The world's failure to respond is felt in every empty tent and every abandoned aid post. These crises are fueled by global indifference and a lack of urgent action. Without immediate intervention, the suffering will only grow, and the consequences will echo for generations. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, renewed conflict has forced over 178,000 people to flee, their lives upended by violence. The international response is weak, leaving displaced families in overcrowded camps with little support. In Mozambique's Cabo Delgado, a surge in attacks has displaced over 46,000 people in just 1 week, most of them children. These children have lost everything, carrying trauma and uncertainty as they seek safety. Humanitarian plans are drastically underfunded, forcing agencies to abandon hundreds of thousands in need. For those left behind, the message is clear: their suffering is not a priority. Global neglect leaves millions vulnerable and alone. Beneath these crises lies a stalled global economy, failing to deliver on its promise of shared prosperity. Growth is sluggish, and mounting debt forces poor nations to choose between creditors and basic services. When disaster strikes, these countries have no financial cushion, amplifying every crisis. Aid budgets are slashed as wealthy nations tighten their belts, leaving places like Haiti with just 8% of needed funding. Health centers close, food programs stop, and the most vulnerable are left with nowhere to turn. This funding shortfall is global. Sudan and Mozambique face similar gaps. The world's richest countries are failing to meet their commitments, pushing millions back into poverty. Economic pressures aren't just stalling progress, they're reversing it. Climate change is now a crisis accelerator, intensifying every other problem we face and amplifying existing inequalities. Its impacts are no longer distant or abstract, they are unfolding in real time, affecting millions across the globe. Since 2023, the worst coral bleaching in history has devastated over 80% of reefs, threatening not just marine life, but also the livelihoods and food security of coastal communities who depend on healthy oceans. Extreme weather, droughts, floods, storms, pushes vulnerable communities to the brink, especially in places like the Sahel and low-lying islands. These disasters are becoming more frequent and severe, leaving little time for recovery. Climate shocks destroy homes and crops, forcing families to migrate and fueling conflict over scarce resources. The struggle for survival often leads to displacement and deepens social tensions. Every disaster adds complexity to the humanitarian crisis, straining already limited resources and making it harder for aid organizations to respond effectively. The climate crisis is now central to global security and development, making survival harder every day. It challenges governments, communities, and international organizations to adapt quickly. More people are pushed into crisis, overwhelming aid systems and putting immense pressure on healthcare, food, and shelter networks. We are in a race against time to adapt to a more hostile planet. The choices we make now will determine the future for generations to come. The tragedy of 2025 isn't just isolated crises, but the dangerous web of interconnectedness that binds them together. In today's world, a single spark in one region can ignite a chain reaction across continents, making every crisis everyone's problem. War in one country fuels hunger in another. Conflict disrupts trade routes, sending shockwaves through global supply chains and leaving families thousands of miles away struggling to find food. Economic stagnation deepens, making entire communities more vulnerable to climate shocks and natural disasters, as jobs vanish and safety nets fray. These aren't separate fires. They're merging into a global inferno, where disasters overlap and amplify each other's impact. Conflict displaces millions, overwhelming neighboring countries and aid systems already stretched to their breaking point, forcing families to flee with little more than hope. Shrinking aid budgets leave the displaced with little support, as humanitarian organizations struggle to meet even the most basic needs. Meanwhile, climate disasters destroy what remains, wiping out homes, livelihoods, and the fragile sense of security people cling to. Crises compound, each one making the next harder to resolve, creating a relentless cycle that threatens to spiral out of control. Over 300 million people now need aid, but resources are dwindling, and the gap between need and help grows wider every day. This is a failure of global leadership and solidarity, a moment when the world's response falls short of the scale of the crisis. Behind the statistics are real lives, millions of people whose futures hang in the balance, waiting for the world to notice and act. The hope for a better world remains alive, but only if we confront reality, recognize our shared fate, and act with courage and compassion.